All right, today we are diving into a really fundamental shift in how modern software gets built. We're talking about microservices. We're going to explore why giants like Netflix and Amazon literally tore apart their massive single code bases and chose something way smaller, way more agile, and what that all means for the apps you and I use every single day.
But first, let me ask you a question. Just imagine you're running a global streaming service, right? Millions of people are watching. What do you think is the smallest possible mistake? I'm talking one character out of place that could bring the entire thing crashing down for hours.
You're not going to believe this. Back in 2008, a single missing semicolon in their code brought the entire Netflix website to its knees. For hours. One character, that's it. So, how on earth is that even possible?
Well, the culprit was an approach called the monolith. And a monolithic app is exactly what it sounds like. One massive, unified system. Every single part, user accounts, the movie catalog, your recommendations, it's all tangled together into one giant block of code. And that means a tiny failure in one little part can cause a catastrophic failure for the whole shebang.
This single point of failure really gets to the heart of the problem with this traditional way of building software. Starting with a monolith is simple, but as it grows, it can very quickly become its own worst enemy. So let's get a proper definition here. A software monolith is a single application with one code base, one deployment unit, and usually a single technology stack. And look, in the beginning, this makes a ton of sense. It's pretty simple for developers to wrap their heads around, and it's easy to scale. You just make more copies of the entire application.
But as the application gets bigger, oh man, the cracks start to show. The code base becomes this huge, intimidating monster for new developers. Your tools start to lag, actually building the code can take hours, and testing can take days. And what if you need to scale just one feature? Tough luck. You have to scale the entire application. And like we saw with Netflix, rolling out new code becomes this high-risk, all-or-nothing event.
So if the monolith is the source of all these headaches, what's the solution? Well, this is where a totally new approach comes into the picture, the microservice architecture.
Okay, the formal definition is it's an approach where one single application is developed as a collection of small, independent services. The key phrases there are small services and, this one is crucial, built around business capabilities. Let's unpack what that really means. At its heart, it's just about breaking things down. You take that one big, tangled-up application and you carefully separate it into smaller, manageable pieces that can be developed, deployed, and scaled all on their own. It's kind of like detangling a giant ball of yarn into neat, separate spools. So let's really visualize the difference here. What does moving from that big monolith to these little microservices actually look like?
This image just says it all, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the monolith. It's like that one messy drawer in your kitchen where everything is just tossed in together. And on the right, you have microservices. Ah, so nice. Each function gets its own neat, separate, organized little box. You can now change one thing without worrying about breaking all the others.
Now, this idea didn't just appear out of thin air. It actually evolved from earlier concepts like service-oriented architecture, or SOA, which also focused on breaking applications into services. But after some key discussions started around 2011, the tech world kind of settled on the term microservices in 2012 to describe this newer, more refined, and frankly more agile approach.
Okay, so how do they actually work in practice? It really all comes down to a few core principles. The first and maybe the most important principle is a total change in how you organize teams and code. Instead of grouping people by their technical skill, like having a database team or a UI team, you organize them around specific business capabilities.
So what this means is you create these cross-functional teams that own a specific business function from top to bottom. Think about a site like Spotify. Instead of one giant team, you'd have a playlist team that handles everything about playlists, and then a search team that owns everything about finding music. Each team owns its own vertical slice of the entire application.
The second principle is a huge shift in mindset. You move from thinking about projects to thinking about products.
Amazon has this famous mantra that just nails it. You build it, you run it. In a microservices world, the team that develops a service is also responsible for it for its entire life, including running it in production. This creates this incredibly powerful feedback loop and a really deep sense of ownership.
And the third key principle, this is about how all these little services talk to each other. The goal here is to have smart endpoints and dumb pipes.
This shows a really key difference in philosophy. The older approaches, like you see on the left, often used a really complex, centralized, smart pipe, like a central brain, to manage all the communication. The microservice way, on the right, flips this on its head. It puts the logic inside the services themselves, those are the smart endpoints, and then lets them communicate over simple, direct channels, or dumb pipes, like basic web APIs.
So, after making all these changes, after all this work, what's the actual payoff for a business? I mean, why go through all this trouble?
Well, it all boils down to making the business better, cheaper, and faster. Your systems become more resilient because one service failing doesn't crash the whole app. It can be cheaper, with way less testing effort and lower maintenance. And it's definitely faster because these small, independent teams can release updates much more quickly.
And this leads us to one final, really profound idea. We've seen that microservices are organized around what the business does, and they're owned by specific teams. This is not an accident. In fact, it reveals a fundamental law of software development.
This is known as Conway's Law. What it's saying is that any organization will end up producing a system design that mirrors its own communication structure. See, microservices aren't just a technical choice about code, they're a reflection of how teams are built and how they talk to each other. And that might be the most powerful takeaway of all. It suggests that to change your software, you might first have to change your organization. Thanks for joining me for this explanation.